This morning we're going to be tying up a pattern I've been working on, which is just a generic kind of quill-bodied olive mayfly. So I've got a size 14 dry fly hook in the vise, and I'm just going to get my thread started. I'm just using some olive nano silk on this just so I don't build up too much bulk. And nano silk has a tendency to not build up a lot of bulk. So we're going to take our thread about halfway down the shank of the hook here, and then we're going to move it back towards the eye about half of the way in between what I just put down. So we should be sitting just about like that. The first material I'm going to tie in is going to be a wing, and I'm actually using this kind of fabric-y stuff for the wing. I'm just going to place that wing that I've cut out here on the top of the hook. We're going to take a wrap right over the top of it, and it'll pull that wing over, and that's okay. My next wrap is going to go crossways on the wing closest to me. If I can get my thread to not hook up in it. Once I have a couple of wraps on like that, I'm going to go ahead and go back on with my thread onto the shank of the hook here. So just with a couple of wraps there, I'm securing those wings down. I want to go pretty close against the base of those wings, so I don't have quite as big of a base. That'll allow me to tie in a lot closer. But you do need to be really careful. This stuff just grabs hold. You might notice that I've tried to put some olive marker on this because this is really from beginning to end a very olive pattern. Now I'm just going to lay some thread back, wraps back here to the bend of my hook, so I have a thread base to tie in my tails. Once I get that to about the barb of the hook, I'm going to go ahead and wrap a couple of wraps forward. For the tail, I'm just going to turn to some olive micro-fibbets here. They work out really nicely for tailing material. I'm going to pinch them to maintain that alignment, and then I'll go ahead and remove those off. For measurement, I want this a little bit longer than the shank of the hook, and a lot of times in this case I'm just going to eyeball it a little bit and then make adjustments. So first I'm just going to get a wrap or two to secure those tail fibers onto the top of the shank of my hook, and then I can kind of look. My length there is too long, so I can, because I've only taken a couple of thread wraps, I can go ahead and just pull on those, and those will shorten right up for me to where I want them. Right about there. I'm going to spin my thread counterclockwise quite a bit here. In this case, I'm doing it more to flatten that thread out so that I'm leaving less of a profile behind. So I'm going to take that kind of back to where the barb of the hook is and where we're going to have that abdomen start. And I'm going to take one wrap that's going to go underneath those tails. I'm going to pull that forward, and that's just going to help me prop those tails up a little bit. And then I'm going to use part of these fibbets to help us with that taper. So I'm going to cut them off, but I'm going to cut them off so that they end right at the very back of the wings. That way I can use the mass of those fibbets to help us with our taper. So with that in place, I can just take some wraps right back up to behind the wings. And that's going to lock down the butt ends of those tail fibers. So I'm going to take a stripped peacock herl here. It's been dyed olive, so it fits in with the olive nature of this pattern. Just about every material we put on here is going to be olive. So I'm going to be really gentle with this actually. I'm going to turn my thread counterclockwise to flatten it out a little bit, but this nano silk, just like with the wings, It's tough material, and if you crank down on it really hard here, you're going to cut right through it. And then when you go to wrap it up the body to create the quill body on the fly, it'll break right off, which is incredibly frustrating when that happens, and that happens to all of us. So I've got that in right about where I want it. I'm going to start moving towards the front, and then similar to the tailing material, I'm going to cut the butt end of this quill off so that it's right behind the wings. Again, just using that added material to add a little bit of bulk for the taper here. So I've moved my thread up here right behind the eye, and that will just, as I'm twisting rotating the vise here, that thread is going to wrap around the hook. And if I leave it behind those wings, when I'm doing that, it's going to move forward and it's going to compress those wings, and that's not what I want. So I want to put it there because then I can just turn around and unwind it, and we should be in good order. So I'm just putting that quill in my hackle pliers here. The first few wraps here, you're going to want to be kind of careful because this stuff is brittle. And I do want to avoid that hook point. So we'll get that first wrap right around the tail. And then we're just going to take careful wraps here of that strip peacock herl in olive. The further you go down, the thicker this becomes. So it's a little bit less brittle, but you certainly can't just go to town on it and pull as hard as you can. It'll break it right off. But this is going to create a really nice body here. So this is what I mean by that. Now I can take my thread and I can unwind it from up front. It didn't muck around with my wings at all. So as we unwind it, it's going to jump back behind the wings for us. Right about there. Once I'm there, I'm going to go ahead and take a wrap over the top of those that quill body here. I'm going to just take a couple of wraps to just make sure we've got it good and solidly locked down. It just takes a couple of thread wraps there. I'll take a couple of wraps over the top of it as well. And then I can go ahead and release that from my hackle plier. Set those aside, and we can come in and we can cut the butt end of that quill off. So now, we've made some progress. We've got our wings in place. We've got a nice olive quill body. We've got our nice tailing material that's in olive. So for hackling, we're going to turn to a nice whiting hackle that is in this same kind of olive color. And I've already got a feather prepared here. You can see I've cleared off the stem on that. We're going to tie that right in up against the shank of the hook behind the wings. We're going to take the first wrap over the top of it. My second wrap, I'm going to want to go closer to the wings on the opposite side of this feather. Easier said than done sometimes. I'm trying to keep my fingers as much out of the way as I possibly can, but hopefully you can see by doing that, everything is standing at a right angle, and that's one of the keys to getting a good hackle. So if you look at it, you can see that my stem is almost exactly at a 90-degree angle. I'll just go ahead and continue to secure that down, getting it in tight in between those two wings. And then I'm going to go in front of those wings, and you'll see that our stem is now bending up towards the eye of the hook, which is exactly where I want it. I don't want to get too close to the eye because I don't want to crowd it, but that's not going to go anywhere. I can go in now, and we'll just clip this off really close just so we can not have any stem hanging over the eye of the hook. So I'll go ahead and hold that hackle a little bit out of the way. Gonna tie in really tight. See me exaggerate and kind of bob in and out of those wings that we have in place. I'll take a couple of thread wraps back to where I want that to start. The next material that we're going to tie on is we're going to tie on some olive superfine dubbing. And don't be surprised if you have to go with a couple of helpings here. I'd prefer to go a little bit light and then go back to my dubbing box. I'm just going to finger dub that on, and as usual, super fine will just dub in nice and tight, and that's what we're looking for. And this is going to create a bit of a thorax for us. So once I've got that kind of taken care of, I'm going to go ahead and wrap a couple of wraps back right over that stem. I'm going to continue to tighten that. I'm going to grab hold of this wing because I'm going to bring a wrap up and over that wing. And then I'm going to bring it back over on my side, going right through the middle towards the lens side. So it's what we call an X-wrap. And what this is going to do is it's going to help us cover up the bottom of this material. I'm going to take a look underneath. It's getting close, but not quite where I want it. So that's what I mean. I'm going to go back for a second helping, and I think that that will only happen just this one time, last time here. It's always good, especially if you've got a rotating vise, to inspect the other side or inspect the bottom. All I can see is this side of the fly. I have no idea what you're looking at. So you can end up tying something that looks great on your side of the hook, and then you look at it from the other side and you're unfortunately sometimes very disappointed with what you're seeing. So this is again going to be our thorax. So I'm going to build most of the bulk here right behind those two wings while we continue to tighten that up. I might even grasp those wings a little bit and pull them backwards just to give me a little bit more breathing room. Then we're going to come up, trying not to crowd the eye of the hook here. So I've gone ahead and placed my thread on the bobbin cradle. I'm going to go ahead and attach my hackle pliers here. This is one of those areas where I'm going to maneuver those wings a little bit by pulling them forward, which will give me a little bit of extra room to work in the back here. And we're going to want kind of touching wraps moving forwards, and we're going to want those wraps right up against the base of that wing. So I'm probably just going to get a couple wraps, maybe 3, like that. Then I'm going to move up towards the front, and when I move up towards the front, I'm going to take those wings and I'm going to fold them back just so that I can get a good turn right behind those wings. And then we're just going to work on taking a few more touching wraps. This does not need to be a big bulky hackle. That's going to work for us. We'll just move our bobbin cradle out of the way now. Tighten up my thread a little bit. Going to want that thread to just drop right over the top of that hackle fiber so we get it locked in place. And then I'm going to kind of pull that hackle fiber back so I can get a couple of wraps right around the eye of the hook. And with that, I can let go with my hackle pliers. So at this point I'm going to come in with my scissors and I want to cut that hackle fiber off very close, right where the stem is meeting the shank of the hook. About like that. Got a little straggler there. We'll do a little bit of cleanup here. Rather than whip finishing, sometimes I like to just use a half hitch tool here. It's got a hole in the end. The reason I like using this sometimes with dries is it'll help push some of those fibers back and not trap them. About like that. And then once we get here, we'll just go ahead and get some extra length. And we're going to just put a couple of turn whip finish in here. I don't need a lot because I've just put in a lot of half hitches. So we're just going to try to keep that from trapping fibers, but moving back into the base of that hackle. Just about like that. Tighten my thread up a little bit. We're going to reach over and grab our thread cutter here. And so with that, that's the pattern I've been just kind of mucking around with. It's really just an olive, completely olive mayfly. From the tail to the quill to the hackle to the wings that are sticking up here. Tried to make it all nice and olive. So if you see a bunch of olives coming off, this is going to be a good pattern to turn to. Fun to tie. Have to be a little bit patient and careful. Thread control and not pulling too hard on your material so it breaks off. And if you can get that far, then you're going to have a fly. So throw a hook in your vise and give this one a shot.